working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus on today's headlines. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas has reached a new stage, with Israeli troops reportedly surrounding Gaza City and reaching the coastline, effectively dividing the region in two. Another 42 OFWs and an infant are set to return from Israel today, increasing the total number of Filipinos repatriated since October 18 to 145. Filipinos are marking the 10th anniversary of Super Typhoon Haiyan, one of the strongest typhoons on record. Tacloban City, the capital of Leyte province, bore the brunt of Haiyan's fury and had to be rebuilt almost from scratch. And now it looks like any other Filipino city with traffic-clogged streets and bustling restaurants. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas has reached a new stage, with Israeli troops reportedly surrounding Gaza City and reaching the coastline, effectively dividing the region in two. From the air, Israeli forces claim to have targeted 450 sites overnight and seized a Hamas compound, targeting strongholds including tunnels and observation posts. The Palestinian militant group Hamas is expected to rely on its vast network of underground tunnels in the fighting. The Israeli military also announced a 4-hour window for safe entry to the southern portion of Gaza, which is not under attack. Many Palestinians, however, stay in the northern half of the enclave, either doubtful of promises of safe passage or skeptical that southern Gaza is any safer, as airstrikes continue to wreak havoc on the region.
في مكان مكتظ بالأطفال ومكتظ بالنساء ومكتظ بالنازحين والكل يريد أن يحمي نفسه لكن كانت الطائرات تفاجأ هؤلاء الأطفال في هذا الوقت المتأخر من هذه ساعات الليل المتأخرة لتقصف هذه البيوت الآمنة.
Hospitals in the area are overwhelmed, and now fair warning to our viewers, as the images that you are about to see may be disturbing. Talat Bar Layan Albaz sobs in anguish as the painkiller she was given wear off after her legs were amputated as a result of an Israeli strike on Gaza as part of Israel's struggle against Hamas. Layan was injured last week in a hit on the Al-Karara district of Khan Yunis, according to her mother. Lama Al-Aga, 14, and her sister Sarah, 15, are in neighboring beds in the hospital's burns unit. They're being treated following an October 12 strike that killed Sarah's twin, Sama, and 12-year-old brother, Yaya, according to their mother, who is sitting between the two hospital beds and fighting back tears.
انت زراعة إسرائيلية رجلي بالزرع مش مقطوعات على الآخر بديش أترف سنة أنا أترف سنة بتفكر بديش أفكر أنا بديش أفكر.
Lama's half-shaved head and forehead are covered with stitches and burnt scars. Meanwhile, Ahmad Abu Shama, 14, walks around the remains of his family home in Khan Yunis while wearing a green football jersey and matching shorts.
قاعد على السرير واخوي جنبي طلع رجلي بقول له وين هادي وينها يقول لي هيا بس انت مبنج قاعد يضحك علي للصبح وجا ابن عم الثاني وقال لي لقيتها صرت عيط 10 دقايق نص ساعة زي هيك وبعدين وقت الحمد لله. كلش كرة القدم بالنسبة لي حياة 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 الحمد لله. بكرة بصير بلعب إن شاء الله بس يركبوا للرجال.
When briefing media on the situation in Gaza, Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated the way forward is clear.
A humanitarian ceasefire now. All parties respecting all their obligations under international humanitarian law now. This means the unconditional release of the hostages in Gaza now. The protection of civilians, hospitals, UN facilities, shelters and schools now. More food, more water, more medicine, and of course fuel entering Gaza safely, swiftly, and at the scale needed now. Unfettered access to deliver supplies to all people in need in Gaza now. And the end of the use of civilians as human shields now. None of these appeals should be conditional on the others. And for all of these, we need more funding now.
Prime Minister Netanyahu stated that Israel is waging a battle of civilization against barbarism, ruling out any negotiations on a ceasefire until the prisoners are released.
The axis of terror is led by Iran. It includes Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and their other minions. If the Middle East falls to the axis of terror, Europe will be next, and no one will be safe. The paramount need is to defeat this axis. That battle is now being waged by us against Hamas in Gaza. There is no substitute for victory.
Meanwhile, the United States, an ally of Israel, sent its top diplomat, Antony Blinken, on a Middle East tour that concluded on Monday in Turkey. Now, during his visit, Blinken's host called for an Israeli ceasefire, which the U.S. has not endorsed. After meeting his Turkish counterpart, Hakan Fidan, Blinken stated that the U.S. was working very aggressively to provide any for trapped civilians in Gaza, but he did not provide further details before departing for Japan.
Look, we know the deep concern here for the terrible toll that Gaza is taking on Palestinians, on men, women, and children in Gaza, innocent civilians, a concern that we share and that we're working on every single day. We've also had very important conversations throughout this trip with countries in the region on the role that everyone can play in making sure that the conflict doesn't expand, doesn't spread to other countries. And of course, we remain very focused on the hostages held by Hamas, including Americans, in making sure we're doing everything possible to bring them home.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was traveling in the country's remote northeast on Monday and didn't meet with Blinken, apparently snubbing Blinken. NATO member Turkey, which is allied with the Palestinians but also has ties with Israel, has announced that it is recalling its ambassador to Israel and cutting off contact with Netanyahu. Now, Mr. Bernard Carpio, a Filipino living in Israel, has now joined us. He's come to inform us about his current experience, and we'll find out how it's like to live there right now with rockets and sirens sounding virtually every day. Bernard, magandang hapon po ba dyan?
Umaga pa po dito, alas 7 po ng umaga.
Opo. Kumusta na po kayo, Bernard?
Ngayon po ay wala kaming nararanasan na siren ngayon sa mga oras na ito mula kagabi o kahapon ng maghapon. Pero sa ibang lugar po dito ay continuous po yun.
At ano pong ginagawa nyo kapag po nagkakaroon ng mga ganitong rocket attacks po at pag nagbe-blare na po yung siren, ano po ang protocol sa inyo dyan? Ano pong ginagawa ninyo?
Opo, usually po ang dalas ng mga siren dito dati is araw-araw po mula noong October 7. At pagka mayroong mga siren naman po, ang bilin sa amin ay kailangan 90 seconds po. Kailangan ma-save yung sarili. Pumunta sa pinaka-safe na lugar. Ang unang safe na lugar po yung mga bomb shelter. Mapapansin nyo po yung background ko na yan kung saan kapag may mga rockets attack, dyan po ako minsan nakakapag-record ng mga missile na ini-intercept po ng Iron Dome. Kaya lamang po, hindi ko na i-record lahat dahil pagka malapit sa aming area ay delikado, kaya pumupunta na po kami agad sa bomb shelter.
Pwede nyo pakita sa amin ngayon, yung bomb shelter po? Maipapakita nyo po sa amin ngayon, malapit lang po ba?
Ito po yung building namin, nasa ilalim po ako ng building. Papakita ko po sa inyo yung bomb shelter. Shelter, may pintuan po siya na isa. At dito po kami pumupunta pagka may mga missile at rockets attack. Ito meron siyang concrete na tuan. Pagka sinara po ito, mamaya, double lock po siya. Ito po ay papasok. Malawak po ang pwesto ng aming bomb shelter po dito.
Ayun. Okay
Pwede po mag-accommodate ng mga 100 na tao po.
Okay. Ayan. Okay
Ito
po.
po yung pintuan kapag halimbawa, ayan,
Opo.
sinasara po namin ito pagka
Safe
may
po
mga
yung lock niyan.
bomba po o mga rockets. Safe po yung lock po nito, bali dalawa po, kabilaan. Ganito po talaga ang mga nakadesign na pintuan sa mga bomb shelter. Halimbawa rin kasi pagka yung mga terorista ay tulad po dun sa north, ay sa south. Kapag ka po hindi lock nila sa loob ito, ay may hirapan na po silang buksan sa labas. Ito naman po kung halimbawa ay meron din po kaming paglalagyan ng filter dito para sa hangin. Kung halimbawa magtagal yung nandito kami sa loob ng bomb shelter, bubuksan po namin ito at lalagyan namin ng filter.
Okay.
Para yung hangin po mag-circulate. Meron din po mga naka-stock na tangke po ng tubig doon para sa inuminan. At saka dito naman po ay merong emergency exit para sa rescue po, yung maliit halimbawa. Pagka po halimbawa na-stock dito yung mga tao dahil nasira o nakoberan yung pintuan po doon na
okay
main
po.
door po dito po sila dadaan
May emergency
kapag kami
exit.
magre-rescue.
Opo. Paano po ang mga ibang aktibidad nyo? Normal po ba ang trabaho ninyo? Pumapasok pa rin po ba kayo? Ano po yung mga gaya ng church activities?
Opo, doon po sa trabaho, yung karamihan po kasi dito ay sa caregivers po. Okay naman po sila dahil naka-stay sa mga amo, hindi po pinapalabas ng kanilang mga amo. Dahil natatakot din kanilang pinangangamuhan, baka pagka lumabas ay magkaroon ng aberya sa kalsada. Pero yung pong mga, halimbawa po, yung mga leave out, tulad namin ay minsan limitado ang trabaho po dahil hindi po nagpapapunta yung mga employer po. Tungkol naman po sa activities sa amin po ay sa iglesia po ay okay naman po ang pagsamba namin pero binabawalan po yung pagtitipon ngayon dito na marami halimbawa sa hall po o sa labas para maiwasan po yung magkaroon ng aberya po. Halimbawa, meron racket sa attack po, may mga siren para hindi po sila mga aksidente po.
Kanina po nasabi nyo sa akin na ang inyong anak ay isang sundalo.
Opo, marami pong mga kabataan Pilipino po dito, mga anak ng mga kababayan natin dito na nasa sundalo din po. Kasi po ay required po dito ang papasok sa sundalo bago po sila pumasok ng college po. Pagka-graduate nila ng grade 12 ay yun po ang pananggobyerno po dito susundalo po lahat, babae man o lalaki. Yung mga sundalo po rito na kabataan, mga anak po ng ating mga kababayan, marami din pong nakadeploy sa mga mapapanganib na lugar dito tulad sa Gaza po, sa mga borders. Kasi hindi lamang po sa Gaza ang binabantayan po dito lahat po ng borders. Halimbawa, borders po sa north, yung sa Lebanon, yung sa Syria, at yung pang iba po. Yung mismo sa loob po ng Israel, ang marami pong borders din dito yung sa Gaza at saka sa West Bank. Doon po nakakadestino po yung ibang mga anak ng kababayan natin, mga Pilipino po dito.
Nag-aalala siguro ang mga magulang. Kayo po, may anak din po kayo, di po ba?
Opo, bali, ang anak ko rin po ay nasa military po. Pero sa awa ng Diyos po ay hindi po siya nakapasama doon sa nakadeploy, doon sa mga delikado. Pero nandun po sila ngayon sa military base po. Marami pong mga kababayan natin dito na talagang sinasabi natin tumutulong sa seguridad po ng bansang ito na masasabi natin binubuwis ang kanilang buhay po para sa kapayapaan po dito. Para sa mga tao po nasa loob ng Israel. Kaya po yun ay tawag dito, proud po ang mga Pilipino po dito dahil katuwang sila sa seguridad po. Yung ilan po katuwang sa seguridad sa bansang ito po.
Bernard, syempre alam natin na ang wish nating lahat ay huminto yung gera. Bukod po sa paghinto ng gera, ano po ang gusto nyong iparating na mensahe sa mga nanonood ngayon sa inyo?
Opo, ang gusto lamang po namin o maipaabot sa lahat ng nanonood po, kahit po sa balita na magulo dito sa Israel, ay hindi naman buong Israel po. May mga parte po na magugulo talaga sa Israel. Pero kapag nakikita natin sa balita, ay masyado silang nag-aalala po. Kailangan ay halimbawa meron silang kamag-anak po dito sa bansang Israel. Tanungin po nila kung saan sila ang location po nila. Kasi ang magulo po dito ay bahagi lang po ng Israel. Hindi po buong Israel mismo. Kaya kami minsan ay nakakapag-record ng video kahit na may mga rockets attack. Ibig lang namin ipakita po, sa kabila po ng kaguluhan dito ay safe pa rin po kami. Yun naman po ang aming nais na iparating. Kaya minsan nakakapag-post kami na minsan puro rockets attack, makikita yung pag-intercept ng mga Iron Dome sa mga rockets. Pero after po nun ay normal na po sa lugar namin. Pero meron po talagang lugar dito na talagang medyo delikado. At alam naman po natin na marami nating kababayan ang nananalangin din para sa kapayapaan din dito sa bansang Israel. Ang lagi namin masasabi po sa kanila ay magtiwala sa Panginoon Diyos po. Hindi naman tayo pababayaan ng ating Panginoon Diyos. Kahit na nasa gitna tayo ng digmaan, ay ipakiusap natin po sa panalangin na maingatan po tayo. Yun po ang pinakamabisang sandata po namin dito, yung panalangin po.
Totoo po yan. Maraming salamat po, Bernard. At mag-iingat po kayo. Lagi rin po kayo sa aming mga panalangin. Mr. Bernard Carpio from Israel. Now, another 42 OFWs and an infant are set to return from Israel today, increasing the total number of Filipinos repatriated since October 18 to 145. 3 of the 4 caretakers murdered in the latest Israeli war have already been returned home and laid to rest. Documents for the repatriation of the 4th caregiver, Paul Vincent Castelvi, are being processed. The Department of Migrant Workers predicts that more OFWs will return as confrontations between Israel's defense forces and Hamas continue in the coming weeks.
Which means that the Israeli government will take care of the family and will continue to support the parents, the husband, if there were children, the children, will continue to support them through a monthly income and through different programs that we as government take responsibility.
A group of protesters consisting of families and friends of Israeli hostages who were captured by Hamas on October 7 gathered outside the Knesset in Jerusalem to demonstrate and urge the government to take more action to bring the hostages back.
So everybody knows everybody's connected in some way, and I came here today to show solidarity or to be with my friends, to be with the kids, to shout as strong as we can to the people over there in the Knesset to do something to bring those people back. As you heard, it's unthinkable that until now we know nothing about them. We have no proof of life for nobody. The Red Cross has not seen them even once. At the same time, they come and tell us that we need to show the Hamas murderers as much sympathy and go by the ways of the law to treat them. It's shocking. It's unbelievable. So
I still hold that position, that the only way for us to be secure is with peace. And what we saw on Saturday is the outcome of a state of prolonged war. And we won't have a sustainable life with more war.
The United Nations raised worry over heavy fighting in northern Myanmar between the army and an alliance of ethnic minority groups, which has resulted in civilian casualties and the displacement of more than 30,000 people.
Turning to another part of the world, to Myanmar, I can tell you that we are alarmed by the heavy fighting, particularly in Shan State, in the northern part of the country, with reports of artillery shelling and airstrikes that led civilian casualties and tens of thousands being newly displaced internally and hundreds across the border. The Secretary General condemns all forms of violence and reaffirms that civilians should be protected in accordance with international humanitarian law, in line with Security Council Resolution 2669, he urges restraint and de-escalation of tensions, including in the interest of regional stability. And our humanitarian colleagues tell us that since October 26th, nearly 33,000 men, women, and children have been displaced, which is causing, obviously, humanitarian needs to surge. Essential roads are obstructed by checkpoints operated by both sides, while phone and internet service are disrupted. The main airport in Lasio has been closed since the escalation of fighting got underway. We need unimpeded humanitarian access and for red tape to be eliminated so that life-saving aid and services can reach people in need. We urge all parties to the conflict to adhere to international humanitarian law, safeguarding the lives and well-being of civilians and the aid workers trying to assist those civilians. Across Myanmar, 2 million people are now internally displaced, many of them having been uprooted a number of times. As a reminder, the humanitarian response plan for Myanmar is just 28% funded, with only 2 months left in the year.
Last week, fighting erupted in wide regions of Shan State, close to the Chinese border. On Saturday, the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army, the Tang National Liberation Army, and the Arakan Army claimed to have taken control of dozens of outposts and fort towns, as well as to have cut off major trade routes to China. A junta spokesman has previously dismissed as propaganda suggestions that armed factions had taken control of many towns in Shan State. The battle represents a threat to the army not seen since the coup of Aung San Suu Kyi in 2021. Overall, inflation in the Philippines eased to 4.9% in October, slower than the 6.1% reported the month before, according to the Philippine Statistics Authority on Tuesday. That is today. According to the PSA, with the figure, the national average inflation from January to October 2023 is 6.4%.
Ang pangunahing dahilan ng mas mabagal na antas ng inflation nitong Oktubre 2023 kaysa noong Setyembre 2023 ay ang mas mabagal na pagtaas ng presyo ng food and non-alcoholic beverages. Ang nag-ambag ng malaki sa pagbagal ng inflation sa food and non-alcoholic beverages ay ang mas mabagal na pagtaas ng presyo ng vegetables, tubers, cooking bananas at iba pa, na may 11.9% inflation. Ang pangalawang commodity group na may pinakamalaking ambag sa pangkalatang inflation nitong Oktubre 2023 ay ang restaurants and accommodation services na may 6.3% inflation at 12.3% share sa pangkalatang inflation. Ang pangunahing nag-ambag sa inflation ng restaurants and accommodation services ay ang restaurants, cafe and the like na may 6.4% inflation.
Inflation rate in Metro Manila also decelerated to 4.9% in October from 6.1%. Inflation rate in areas outside Metro Manila likewise slowed down to 4.9%. It was 6% in September this year. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.